So I think the naming is very intentional.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me on the meeting? Yes. Hey guys, welcome to the Azure OpenAI Meetup group. And today we are in the Global Azure event. It's a community event run by people, fans of the Azure all over the globe. This is the Auckland version of it. In today's meetup, we've got two speakers. We've got Daniel Scott-Raynsford, or DSR for short. He's a partner technology strategist at Microsoft. He loves helping organizations. He used to be a Microsoft MVP for 3 years before joining Microsoft. He focusing currently on AI application, doing more with less, and he's going to talk to us about GPT and GPT-4 in general. And we also have the second speaker, which is Marcel Medina. He's a lead developer. He's a newly minted Microsoft MVP, so congrats for that. And he's a playground enthusiast and a coder. He's gonna talk to us about data API builders for Azure databases. So without further ado, let's kick this out.
Yeah. Thanks. Fire exits. We're going to do our fire exits. Before I forget.
Sorry.
I'll do it up. I'm up here. Yeah. So if the alarms go off, hopefully they won't, I'm sure they won't. The fire exits for the building are out on either sides of the lift. So lifts out where you came in. So head down to the ground floor. The evacuation point is across the road at the hotel, the Sofitel. Toilets are also out by the lifts. On the males are on the left-hand side of the lifts when you're facing the females on the right. Yeah, done. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. Thank you. This is actually is this our first event this year? Feels like it is.
No, it is not.
Yeah. It is not. Okay.
Yeah.
So, just starting my stopwatch so I don't go over. So, OpenAI. We've already been talking about it. Everyone has probably been thinking about it. Everyone's used it. Most of you, as we saw, has been using it to some degree, either through ChatGPT or potentially, things like Midjourney and DALL-E. You could have even been using it through other applications and not even known about it. This thing has become ubiquitous, and it is probably going to be one of the biggest changes for everyone that we've seen in many, many years. I can't express this enough. And what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to take you through a bunch of stuff in a real short amount of time. I didn't have my clicker, silly me. Let's see if this works. No. Apologies, should have had my clicker. Battery. There we go. So what are we going to do? We're going to talk about, hey Rory, oh, there's pizzas. We'll, let's have them here. Tell you what, while I'm doing the intro, does people want to get pizzas now, or how do we want to do this? Okay, we'll do it between sessions. You just have to smell it and go, wait. Okay, so what is generative AI? We're going to talk about the Azure OpenAI Service. I'm going to take you through the playground, lots of demos there. We're going to talk about the models and APIs, and we're going to run through prompt engineering. Ryan is already an advanced prompt engineer. And then we are going to do some Q&A if we have time, but appreciate we don't have a lot of time. So I always start with an inspirational prompt. Everyone loves an inspirational prompt. I'm not going to read it out. This was generated by Professor Porsington. I generated it using GPT-4, which is a generative AI model produced by OpenAI, available as part of Bing AI. The image was generated by another model called the DALL-E model, also produced by the company OpenAI. So if you've used any of these Bing tools, you've been using GPT, large language models. You're already part of this new generation. Are these things though? What do they actually do for us? We kind of use them as chat and we think of them as chat, but they can do so much more. And we are learning day to day that they can go beyond anything that we are looking at here. We are looking at simple things like generate recipes or, explain some concept to me or translate some text for me. They can go far beyond. But fundamentally, they are limitless generation, and understanding with just a few lines of input. They're also pre-trained foundational models. So what's a foundational model? If you've been working with AI for a little while, you will have probably used things called narrow AI models. These are models that are trained to do something specific, one very specific task. For example, computer vision might be trained to recognize faces in a photo. They do that amazingly, but you throw them at anything else and they don't do so well. These are narrow AIs. Foundational models are models that are not trained to do a specific task. They are trained on a large amount of data to perform any number of tasks, not without one specific task in mind. They are trained on a huge amount of text data, these large language models. The data, as I mentioned earlier, is fixed in time. It was taken, depending on the model, in 2021 or 2020. These models are not connected to the internet. They can't just go off and query the internet. If you ask them when was Avatar 2 released, they don't know, because they don't have access to the internet and they are not retrained. Most of us are used to the interactive use cases. Type in a question, get a response back, type in another question, get a response back, argue with the model for a bit. Many of us are used to that. Where we're seeing massive power is in the non-interactive use cases, where you're just doing your job. And these technologies and copilots are behind the scenes using these language models to add value and make your life easier. Copilot, GitHub Copilot is an example of this. We're not actually interacting with the model or telling the model what to do. We're just typing a comment in our code, and suddenly it's popped up and said, here's some code that you want to use. As an example of a non-interactive use case. And we're actually seeing those as the more impactful. Chat is great, non-interactive is even more powerful. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is soon. Got to the last point is we are seeing a complete new approach. We need to take a new approach to how we instruct these models. And this has resulted in this concept of prompt engineering. And I will focus a little bit on this. This is how we get the most out of these models. By the way, when I refer to a model, I'm talking really about any of these foundational models, generative AI, large language models. These terms I'm going to use interchangeably. Mostly they mean very similar things. Biggest question I get asked, how do I add these large language models to my application or my use case, whilst also leveraging the security of Azure? So OpenAI and Microsoft, different companies. Microsoft invested in OpenAI. We combined R&D. We worked together. The models produced by OpenAI, which includes ChatGPT and DALL-E, they are models produced by OpenAI. And as part of this agreement, Microsoft get access to host those models on Azure as part of an Azure service. This is the Azure OpenAI service. And this is what I'm going to focus on today. There are 5 types of models currently available. The first model is GPT-3. This is a text in, text out model. We send text to the model and we get a response. Pretty simple stuff. Very powerful models, but they are the earliest of the models, first generation. Codex, it's a form of GPT-3 model. This is a text in, code out, code in, text out model. Send code to the model and ask it to explain the code, or send some text to the model and ask it to generate code. GitHub Copilot uses the Codex models. So if you've used GitHub Copilot, you've probably used Codex. Third model, DALL-E. This is a text in, image out model. Throw some text at it, get an image. ChatGPT is the one you're most likely to have touched. That is actually a GPT 3.5 model. It is what we call a conversational model. It is designed to take a very specific format of text in, and it will give you a very specific format of text out. But fundamentally, it's still a text in, text out model, but it's designed for a conversation. And then finally, the GPT-4 models, which is what Bing AI is using. These are the most recent and most capable models. They are multimodal. They are text and images in and text out. They're very, very, very powerful. They are also designed around the chat interface as well, the conversational interface, a conversational model. We won't go into too much detail, but they are very, very powerful, very, very new. OpenAI service it sits in Azure and amongst all the other customizable AI models. So we've got it, we've got a vision and speech and stuff. Many of you may have used those. OpenAI Service is just another, it just sits in that space down there in that customizable AI models area. So what is the big difference or specifics about Azure OpenAI Service that you probably need to be aware of? Okay, number one, these are resources you deploy into your Azure subscription. They are yours, your endpoint. You create one, it's your endpoint. It's not a shared endpoint for anyone else. They're the same large language models that OpenAI has created. They're available. You can customize the model. Chances are you won't need to. You can do it. There is, obviously, Microsoft is is built around this concept of responsible AI. It's extremely important to Microsoft. Everything we do has to comply with those standards. These are built in. Responsible AI is built into how the models are exposed, how you access them. There are filters that ideally prevent misuse or aim to prevent misuse and make sure that the information that is being used for meets those guidelines. Fourth point is the models, you can put them inside a virtual network. So you can put your endpoint inside a virtual network and make sure the data that travels to and from your model does not go outside the network. You can also put Azure RBAC on top of it, say, I can access the model, I can make calls to it, but I can't deploy new models or I can't fine tune. So you get the RBAC. And finally, you also get to use Azure AD authentication to the model. This is really important. Most applications should be using Azure AD or an OAuth token-based authentication, not an API key. API key equals bad from a security perspective. So finally, the integration with Azure monitoring tools, that is another piece, that being able to log who's using the models, how they're being used, those sorts of things is also often very important. So one thing I always like to make sure this is very clear. Your data is your data. So anything you put into the model does not get used to retrain the model. It doesn't get used to fine tune any other models. It's not accessible by anyone else. You are passing the data through the model and you're getting output. Now that is stored for 30 days for Microsoft. If it trips any filters, any of your responsible AI filters, human may review that and say, okay, our filters are too sensitive, or actually you're misusing the model. That will be recorded, but that's the only reason. And you can get that turned off. You need to request that, but we're not going to cover that in any detail here. Also, this is a limited access service. Right now, you have to apply to get access. You do. To prevent misuse, obviously, we want to know how you're intending to use it. Right now, you've got to have an organizational account with Microsoft, or basically you've got to have some sort of organizational relationship with Microsoft to apply for that. That will be opened up at some point, but there will always be a limit. There will always be an access process because of the risk of misuse of these services. They really can. We've seen what they can do. Okay, let's go. Demos, how we doing? 11 minutes, not too bad. Okay. When you deploy an Azure OpenAI service, it's a resource, just like anything else you deploy in Azure. This is an OpenAI resource I've deployed into East US. It's currently available in 3 regions: East US, West Europe, and South Central US. If you have data residency requirements that require you can't use any of those regions, you need to be aware of that. Will it be opened up in other regions? Possibly, I'm not going to confirm. Here you also get an endpoint. This is your endpoint for sending requests to the model. This is yours, only yours. You will have sub-endpoint, you'll have subpaths on there, which are the models. So on the left-hand side here, under the resource, I have my model deployments.
It doesn't show up in the screen.
Oh, it does not show up. Okay, good point. Thank you. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to duplicate. So there we go. Sorry about that, people. Back to this. This is the resource. This is the endpoint I have. Anything I want to send to my resource, I'll make that a bit bigger. Okay. We can see there, that's my endpoint. Also have the ability to deploy different models. As I said, there's lots of different models available. I have deployed several models. This is the DaVinci 003, the most capable of the GPT-3 3.5 models. I've got GPT-3.5 Turbo. I would give away anyone know what the other name for GPT-3.5 Turbo is? I don't have anything to give away anyway, so that's a good thing. That is also called ChatGPT. That is the actual name of the model that is executing. I'm also using Code DaVinci 002, which is another name for the Codex model. So that is there are two models in that family. We won't go into too much detail. So these are the models I have deployed. These are available for me to use in my Azure OpenAI service. If I only wanted to use ChatGPT 3.5, I'd only deploy ChatGPT 3.5. So I can create a model, I can select from all the models that are available. And as new models have become available, they will show up in here. But I don't need to do that, I've deployed them. So what I would typically do when I start I'm going to build some amazing new feature, I would go to the Azure OpenAI Studio, which is on the Overview tab. You can also see it down here under Explore. I open that, I land. Yeah, so this is the playground. This is also called the Azure OpenAI Studio. I can start to see what the models can do, some examples of how you might use it. Here's an example of summarizing a big chunk of text, a document, perhaps an article. And here's the code, and this is Python code around how we would make that request. Make that a little bit bigger. So it's pretty simple code. We're just basically using the OpenAI package, and we're setting my endpoint, setting my key. By the way, key's bad from a security perspective, but we won't go there. And then I'm sending a prompt. That is it. I am sending some additional parameters which control how the model behaves, but I won't go into too much detail yet. That's not very exciting. Where I'm typically going to do is I'm going to jump into the chat playground or the completions playground. The chat playground is when you're interacting with the ChatGPT 3.5 or GPT-3.5 Turbo, ChatGPT. It's where I'll interact with that model, or where I'll interact with GPT-4 when it's available. I'll use the completions playground. When I click the completions playground, it opens up this. This is where I can just start hacking away and chucking prompts in. I first have to choose a model. Now, I can use GPT-3.5 Turbo as well, which is ChatGPT, but I'm going to use Text DaVinci. I'm going to show you some examples, and you're going to see all my example notes, because I've spent a lot of time writing these. So here's my favorite little ones. So I appreciate it. Okay. This is a transcription of someone who's just had a car accident talking to their claims person. Hopefully we all haven't been in that situation, but I'm sure many of us has. We want the claims agent helping us, not data entering, right? It's horrible. We want them focusing on our problem, which is we've got a busted car and we're standing on the side of a road. This is a block of text. Who said what? Can't tell, right? What if I want to extract meaning from it? So I want to know the reason for the conversation, the intimate of the customer. How did the agent handle the conversation? What was the final outcome conversation? Create a short summary of the conversation, and was tow truck ordered? Writing code to do this is hard. But if I now say, generate the output, send it to the model, it's just using a REST API, and there we've got the information. And it's going to do a pretty awesome job at it. This is a very, very powerful model. As a developer, that's kind of useless to me because now I have to use Reduce something to extract it. Why don't I do a bit better? And I change the format a little. Now, same conversation, exact same text, but what I've done is I've actually prompt engineered this to get the model to do a better job. I've actually used what's called goal first. I've told the model, this is what I want you to do. First line is the goal. Then I said, I want you to extract this information, and I've given it the keys. And then I've said how I want you to do this. I want you to extract it using in a JSON format. I want you to post the format. I want you pretty printed. I want you to make it look like this. So click generate, and it's going to give me a result. It's going to give them to me in JSON format unless I've run out of. So as you can see, it's interestingly enough. Now, where's the rest? It's missing. This is not, I can't see it myself, but this is missing text. What have I done? I've run out of tokens. So this gives us a little bit of each model. It actually operates behind the scenes on tokens. It translates what we're sending into tokens. Those tokens are then passed through the model and then turned back into our result, which is text. The model, basically a token is approximately 1.75 tokens per word on average. We can actually see what tokens look like broken down. I don't know. If I post that in, we can actually see this is how my text is broken into tokens. The point though is every model has a maximum number of tokens that it will accept. GPT-3.5 models in general are 4,000 tokens for the most capable. And that means 4,000 total tokens. So that could be 2,000 in, 2,000 out, or 1,000 in and 3,000 out. But once we hit that token limit, we're going to get, basically, we aren't going to be able to send any more tokens to that in that request. So what actually happened in my example was I said maximum tokens 100. So it hit the 100 tokens limit. So I've just got to boost that. Let's just give it 695. That'll be fine. That, click generate. So I've now hit that token limit. A little bit about temperature now. I'm running quite long on time. So temperature, that gives us that controls the level of determinism. These models are designed to be creative. They will create content for us and they can be very creative. Sometimes we don't want them to be as creative as they can be. We can turn the temperature down. 0 is the least creative and the most deterministic. Top probability also factors into this, but we really won't have time to go into all of this. So this has now given us our result. Notice it's generated an array of driver names. Great, that's exactly what we wanted. It's extracted the insurance number. So it's done a pretty amazing job. I'm going to show another example. I run a container and an app service just for my own, to run my D&D games on. I have the container logs here. How many times, if you work in IT or you're an engineer, you're looking through logs and you're going, tell me what's going on. Diagnose some issues. Tell me, yeah, we've all done it, right? I'm going to say, summarize the following container logs and identify any issues. These are just a bunch of data. It's going to do a good job. Temperature, good idea to have a low temperature for this one. We don't want too much creativity. We don't want it to be creative about what it thinks is the problem. So, as it told me the logs indicate it was initialized successfully. That is correct. And it was 10 minutes and 10 seconds. It took a long time. However, the software license verification failed, which is exactly true. So now I've extracted some meaningful information out of the model. I haven't trained it. I've just given it some stuff and said, give me some data. Okay, I'm going to quickly flip across into ChatGPT now. The AKA GPT-3.5 Turbo. GPT-3.5 Turbo, the model behaves slightly differently. We need to communicate with it, providing a system message and then the user. So we're actually separating the request response. When you talk to ChatGPT, the OpenAI one, you don't get to set the system message. It's invisible to you. When you talk to Azure OpenAI Service with ChatGPT, you can change the system message. And this is super powerful. So bear with me. I'm going to get my, or just to save me time in typing. Here's my bookstore assistant.
The system message is almost like a persona. It's like,
yep. But it also defines the persona, but also what the model can and can't do. You've all seen people trying to trick models, etc. What I've done is I've updated the system message. So this is going to be sent to the model every request I send. So what I've done is I've said, you're an AI bookstore assistant, you help people out, you're funny, blah, 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 given it a bunch of information. I've also grounded the information with the customer. So see how I've said the customer is a 32-year-old Janet. And Janet's bought some books recently, and Janet has some interest. I'm grounding this prompt in actual valuable knowledge. And this is where, I'm going to tell you, grounding and bringing knowledge into the model as part of your prompts is one of the key things you can do. It's going to add so much value. Just throwing a question at a large language model, you'll always do a better job if you provide grounding, if you provide current valuable knowledge, context, as it were. So now I'm going to say, recommend me a book. Now, what's actually happening behind the scenes is the request is being formed into a JSON payload in a very specific format and sent to an API endpoint called chat completions. Show the code, we can even see there's the chat completions endpoint. And as you can see, I have this JSON payload that I need to format, which has got the role of system and which is system message. And then I've said, here's the user, recommend me a book. And of course, I can actually follow on with that and say, how about a couch? Now, I'm going to say, recommend me a couch. Okay. Now, it should tell me no. So again, the system message has governed what I can do. Now, it's actually, if we look at what was sent, we can see that this request contained all the previous conversation. It contained my previous message, the model response. We're going to hit 4,000 token limit pretty quick with this. We need to think about that. If we are building a chat interface, what happens when you hit that limit? You have to start to summarize the previous conversation. Then context is lost. So there's a whole lot of stuff that are there. Right. Okay, that was real quick. Okay, APIs, just quickly, we've probably got two slides there. Okay, how are you going to add this into your application? If you're using .NET, there's an Azure AI, OpenAI NuGet package. That is the way to go. That supports AAD authentication. There is a Python package from OpenAI, which you can work against Azure OpenAI and the OpenAI APIs. There is also the paved path. Now, this is starting to pick up traction. These are orchestrators, don't have the time to go into them. Recommend looking at semantic kernel or LangChain. They provide a framework over top of these models to greatly enhance their power. This is where the real power is going to start to come in. And then finally, if you can't find a framework or a package, go to REST API. It's just as simple. I'm going to skip over the different models and how they're capable because we are running. I'm going to jump into prompt engineering. I'm going to skip through this real quick. So prompt engineering, we are moving from a syntactic code to semantic meaning. So we're able to define the meaning or what we want the model to do using our language. This is a real change when we're used to writing code. So we need to understand the rules of the engine. And this is what prompt engineering is. It involves the skillful design of input semantic prompts to improve the performance and accuracy in the model. It's all about getting the model to do what you want. You have to learn a different methodology. And there's a lot of techniques, chain of thought, there is one-shot, few-shot training, there is recency bias. There's all these rules that we apply to the human mind, now apply to but key message, you can't add new knowledge to the models. You cannot add new knowledge to the models. Right.
All the posts on LinkedIn of all these prompts, etc. Have you looked at them to see if they're just people's random ones, like I'll write down the 10 that I've used, or are they sort of like this is almost like the overview of training of the right prompts?
I haven't actually looked at all of them. I've looked at some and gone, wow. I mean, there are so many people writing prompts and many of them can get great output without obeying all the prompt rules. And the prompt engineering kind of are guidelines. They're not necessarily hard rules. So you can still not use any of the good prompt engineering techniques and still get great output and great impact. But as far as, exploring the limits of these models. We are not touching the edge, and prompt engineering is going to help us start to understand more and more about what these models can do by really exploring it and trying this stuff. And I think that's a lot on Twitter. We're seeing just people going, wow, it can do this if we just do this. And so this becomes a technique or prompt engineering. So I try and keep up to that. I up to date with that. It's a moving target. I'm going to skip that. I'm going to skip that. So, okay, we're at the end. Right.
So before we jump in, there's a question online. Someone saying like, are the Azure AI models will always be visible to yourself and organization? I mean, the data secure. Like when I query the model and I put it on Azure, is it secure?
So the answer is yes. So if you deploy the model in your Azure OpenAI service, you are using it, and the data is only for you. It does not get stored, except as I mentioned, for the filters and verification of the filters. It is not used to retrain the model. The data is sent to the model, comes through the model, and then comes back. There is no other people who are going to access it. There's no other organizations. It is your endpoint. You're secure in that endpoint. So yeah, it's the most common. There is a page I'm happy to post which talks all about the privacy and how your data is treated. I definitely recommend that. So introduction, there is a learning pathway. If you get a chance to do that, here's a QR code. It's going to take you a few hours. It'll cover basically everything I've just talked about, plus more. If you need access, you can request it via that link. And again, the paved path semantic kernel orchestrators are the goal-based, goal-oriented AI is where the future lies with this technology. Without semantic kernel. It's probably going to be a bunch of new concepts, but if you're you're looking for the next level, that's it. Oh, any other questions, or we want pizza? Oh.
One going off that one about the security of the models and things. When you start up an OpenAI instance and you basically got API access to it, right? What's the default permissions on that? Is that like most of the services where there's nothing available to the outside or anyone else outside of?
Great question. When you deploy it, you get to choose the networking access. So you can say, look, it's public IP address, public address, or you can say, no, there's no public access. So the default is what you choose. You might say, just put this in a VNet. That's my default access, and I can only access it through a VNet. That's probably the best way to do it if you are worried about that level of control. From an RBAC perspective, only you as the owner of the resource will get access, or the contributor for the resource. But if you've granted at the subscription level, you'll actually roll up like any other resource access.
Just wondering if it takes on any of the default permissions from your instance that other things that are in there already.
From your subscription, yes, it will. So if you set everyone in the subscription as a contributor, they'll get access to query the model, to run stuff through the model. So you've got to be aware of that. So great question though.
Just worried about that.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Client having access.
Pizza.
I just want to add, I've just come back from MVP Summit in Seattle, and Microsoft has gone 100% all in on this stuff. Right? Mark Krasinovich, who's the chief technical officer for Azure, I went to a talk he gave, and he said, they showed us some amazing stuff at the summit. And Mark Krasinovich said, we've seen this amazing stuff, right? We are barely, like Dan said, scratching the margins of what this stuff can do. And the implications are just so huge that, we can't even get our head around it. So it's very much at the beginning, but some of the stuff they showed us was really awesome.
Absolutely mind-bending. Awesome. So let's have some pizza. Well, maybe we grab it, let your seats, and then we'll just don't want to give ourselves time. Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Please, if you do have any other questions, please do reach out. Usually do it in an hour and a half. I'm convinced an hour and a half down into 30 minutes, 25. Yeah.
Oh, do we need a sort of resolution?
There's one gluten-free, and I think there's three. Be obvious which ones.
Let me
But they would like to know. Check it out. It's pretty interesting. All right.
I did one on Reactor.
Information or not?
Check out my one.
That's the.
There we're actually got.
See, that's where, I know. Can we get out the back?
Seeing some stuff.
Yeah.
Takes the same.
Played around and go with it.
5 minutes.
I just checked that they have for images and because there are that they have to either enjoy exam.
Oh, have you done the exam? Oh, cool. How was that?
Yeah, yeah, they're getting it.
They're great, Dave.
Think
The question.
you should not expect on AI ChatGPT.
Still learn a lot.
But I think if you pay for ChatGPT,
Give you some idea.
get access to the parameters in the system
Next thing.
message, because you can your APIs, right?
Tools that you can
But if you're just using the free ChatGPT,
That's cool.
you basically they
So what are you going to do for
point that
any other stuff that out there?
an orchestrator sitting in front of
AI part has to learning, but I'm not sure if that's some video games. And
the result should be pretty much the same. Should be the same.
idea.
Any different
Random
big difference between
Yeah.
if you take the GPT-3 model from
Do like
you get an AI service one,
just use
the same model.
Maybe and there is
Microsoft puts filters in front. So some things you can do on ChatGPT you might not be able to do on OpenAI ChatGPT. In most cases, same model, same version,
you
same
limit that with running out.
same result. Well, it kind of is. It kind of is a limitation. Really, if you wanted to get a result, or you want to use a newer model. So GPT-4 is definitely a better model. Need to check.
Normally you take that example.
Yeah.
It's priced in the same way, so it is 1,000 tokens, and I think it's almost the same.
You don't have the unlimited.
So,
Yeah.
depending on
Could
the
be
model,
free
you
to do.
Stop training.
I'm not even which way will be.
it's per thousand.
Can it-
Come back from that little.
GPT-3 Turbo, the ChatGPT is
It's just really, you know,
per thousand.
it's a lot of stuff.
Seeing
That would be, it was kind of like they had summarized their example
either 2 cents or
without passing all of the screen, even what they're talking about. There's the challenge.
for Azure OpenAI Service, you can't use it for free because it's a limited access service. You actually have to have ChatGPT. However, there is, if you want to use GPT-4, it's free.
Yeah.
If you want to use the GPT-4, just use the advertising.
Maybe do the other approach for that.
Yeah. What other approaches are there? I mean,
Oh, right. Thank you. Good questions, though.
You know, like the Louis months ago.
Yeah.
Is that like
I don't know. I mean, it is still, it's definitely still there.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's starting to be. The thing is, it's a cheaper service, right? But I didn't cover things like the Babbage. The Babbage model, very cheap. Do a pretty good install. Meaning.
I'm still struggling to get to Australia. I'm still struggling with.
I don't know.
It's like,
like machine learning?
Yeah. The options, you've got options, you got all.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
New Zealand's
Ahmed will introduce you.
Australia's. The same here.
Wow. So we got
Market share of this AI stuff.
Other area we have like.
I'm sorry.
no, I'm usually on Monday.
That's what I was just thinking. I don't know.
think like
I
it
feel
would be
that.
more
We write
generic.
code on my.
Prior to now, on our one, go back to the office. It's like,
Well, let's.
Yeah.
Well,
Statement about it.
I saw you at the last one.
ChatGPT.
This hasn't been, we haven't done one of these for like. Finally, we have people in person. Hi, everyone.
We're about to. Right?
Well, thank you. It's just, I'm just not used to people.
Something we're looking for, something.
Yes, it is.
That's, I spoke to you about that. You had it.
Yeah,
About, ask the question, properly, allocate the trash.
We're gonna post the video.
Yep.
Accurately.
Yeah, I did do a react.
Otherwise, it's gonna cost a lot of money, sorting it out, yeah. How's it been so far? See you again.
I mean,
Yeah, so you dive deeper.
Just give the date.
So much more. Enjoy the flight out, enjoy the rest of working the rest of the afternoon.
Small machine learning.
Logic.
Yeah, might as well.
Still a good film.
Right,
Oh, looking good.
everyone got pizza? Everyone got everything they need? Got your, yep.
For you guys.
Identifying.
Like with the Android developer.
Oh.
I was originally no way.
Okay, so I just continue with the session. Yeah, I'd like just to thank for this event to happen. It's only happening because of Rory, Luke, and myself, because we've been discussing, wow, global Azure is happening, and then what we're gonna do, or perhaps have like some sessions, right? So that's why that's happening today. But also like this is part of the global event that happened, started yesterday. It's going to end like tomorrow. So you can go like to the website globalazure.net and you can see a range of sessions in there. Like pretty good people just talk about Azure, right? What I'm gonna be bringing here is just like a slice of like what's coming with the data API builder, right? Because this is a new implementation, just came up in March. It's public preview. I think like for the ones who were here before, I just mentioned that possibilities. I'm just going to reinforce that with the slides. For those that don't know me, so I'm Marcelo Medina, I'm a software developer, and I work currently at Datacom as a practice lead. And I was recently awarded like the MVP because of my engagement with the developers, right, in the community. Any developers in here? Developers, we have architects. How many like in the chat? I cannot check it now, but we can count. I think like the session was, I know there's a mix of different roles in here. I'm gonna try to be more generic. Deep dive, I can do it like in a later event. I'm definitely like really interested about like this topic. Right? So, but for today, I'm gonna just kind of glance of what's going on this with the data API builder. For those that don't know, like we have like sessions on code nights, user group. In general, like I just talk about development, or like, you know, we talk about different topics, and the focus is on development and developers. Right? So if you're a junior, a lead developer, or even like an architect, you're gonna take like good use of what's presented on the sessions, right? Also part of Azure, a cloud native user group, where we talk about the latest and greatest on the cloud native space, and .NET Foundation as well, that sponsor like the channel really by providing us like ways of just bringing like the content through the meetup, right, to the user group and to the public in general. So with no further ado, I'm gonna explore here. I'm going to talk about like the overview of what the data API builder is, bring like capabilities, just an idea of like the features available. I think awareness is great because then you know exactly what's available and how you can deep dive onto those pillars, and demos. I think like this one, it's more, I'm going to try mixing the demos with the time. I got like plenty and even like deep diving, but I don't think it's going to happen today. But at the end of the session, you can expect to understand the different features that are available, and then you can further explore if you are interested. Right. Just go like the data API builder, right? So what Microsoft has created, that's part of the Microsoft SQL Server team. So they started with an idea of how you can easily connect to databases in the Azure ecosystem, right? And how you can make the data available for consumption as quick as possible, right? So you can integrate with clients or front ends more quickly. And so you imagine, right? So with the legacy database, sometimes you just like want to extract some sort of information. But you need to create some sort of plumbing for that, either like in .NET, Python, whatever the language. So there's some plumbing required you to be able to connect to those databases. What the solution is providing is a sort of abstraction on top of, well, there are like different protocols available in there. You can see REST, but it's basically all data, and GraphQL. But it starts like you provide some sort of schema, right? So there's some sort of configuration. You provide that sort of schema, and once you launch, that API builder automatically connects to the data source and expose for you the endpoints, right? Either through REST or GraphQL. So we have like this runtime. This is open source, so you can just jump to GitHub and see what's in there. But if you worked, as a developer, I worked with OData implementations in the past. There's some plumbing. You need to do it, right? And just to expose on APIs. That you don't even need to think about that, right? So plumbing is gone. So when you look like to the possibilities, right? Because just like the technology itself does nothing, just helps you to do something. But when you look at that, if you want like to quickly prototype solutions, right? You want to connect database, you expose to front end UIs, you can just take it, right? Just run it. You're going to have API endpoints, and you can consume from your applications. I see this like as a quickly prototype at this stage. It's public preview. When it comes GA, there'll be like a range of features available. And then you can think about, okay, do I need to implement this abstraction to talk to database? Or can I simply leverage this and create my orchestration on top of it? Because the data API builder itself only surface transactional data, right? So if you have like crude operations, like you're creating, reading, updating, deleting, that's perfect for it. But if you have rules, then you need to implement some sort of logic yourself. But it saves you time. You can quickly get something going. Use the link just for the recording, and then you can check later. I mentioned about the database. Which ones? Your SQL, even like your on-prem SQL server, you can run it. Postgres, MySQL, and Cosmos DB. That's what's available on Azure ecosystem and what the data API builder is built upon, right? So you can just take and leverage those databases and create those APIs, right? Very quickly on top of that. Think of references here as well. Features, there are plenty. So you can expose collections. If you're talking like to NoSQL, you can connect to it. SQL relational, tables, views, store procedures, right? So you can provide like the sort of plumbing for that. It has support for authentication, authorization, right? With like OAuth and JWT tokens. You have like also support from ease auth in Azure. Specifically like with the static web apps, where you have like that's implemented, but that's also like supported on Azure. We have like this role-based authorization with claims. So you can validate, okay, based on this claim, a person can do something, can read, can update, can create, right? Can delete. So you can like implement that sort of validation there. Everything through configuration. It's pretty cool. You have like a more like fine-grained level where you can go like to the item level security. So you can, we're talking about records. If you want like to, okay, anonymous users coming to your application, right? As providing you have hooked up authentication, you have like the tokens, and then you can fine grain the access level at the record level. Very powerful. On top of that, as I mentioned, we have REST, OData, the Open Data Protocol, that supports those CRUD operations by leveraging those HTTP verbs, right? Post, put, patch, delete. Because it's OData, you can do like some magical queries, like with filtering, sorting, pagination. GraphQL as well, right? So it's a new like query language in the runtime itself that allows you to do queries, mutations. Do you know like what mutations are? GraphQL mutation is just how you manipulate data. Like you are updating, you are creating, you are deleting. Those are mutations. Queries are just selects, right? Just read operations. All right. And well, you have also like same capabilities, filtering, sorting, pagination, relationship navigation. You know, like when to use GraphQL over API, regular API. There's a use case. But in general, like when you have operations in really chatty operations, right? So if you're leveraging APIs, you're going to make a query, retrieve some data. From that data, you're going to retrieve more. Depending on how you implement, you have like just multiple round trips. With GraphQL, what it does is that you can nest everything in one single payload and submit in a round trip and retrieve like all of the information you need. There are like some gotchas with GraphQL, denial of service. So depending on how you implement that, if you're retrieving everything, you have like a lot of influx of requests, need to think about performance. Have like EaseDev through a dedicated CLI. There is a CLI for that, DAB, Data API Builder CLI. Pretty cool. And that's also embedded to the static web apps CLI as well. So that's handy. I'm going to show how it works. Integration with static web apps. All right, so that's in there. The plumbing is in there. You just hook, works. Open source. So you have access. You can see what's in there. They developed on top of .NET, .NET Core. That's for .NET developers. Just straightforward. You can see how it works, and you can contribute as well. Well, I mentioned about the OData, right? Some examples. So through the URL, right, you can just select like some fields. Like you can make like some filters, have some filters based on columns and values, right? Well, you can sort like the information based on what you need. You can have even cursors, like where you grab like the first number of records and then you continue after this. But it's all there because it's based on the Open Data Protocol. Anyone working with SharePoint in the past, or that is in there? So that's the old thing, but that's cool. That's available in here. The URL, so a reference, if you want to check later, that's in there. The verbs, yeah, I'm gonna go through this one, but you guys know the difference between patch and put? They do similar things. They update. The put, you need to provide all of the payload, right? While you patch, you can just update a particular property.
Nice.
So that's interesting. It supports that. The URL in there for reference. QL, as I mentioned, right? So a new query language in the runtime itself, right? Created by Facebook. And examples of queries. You can see here that we're retrieving a user with ID 1 through 3. We grab like some name and email, but we also nesting more like posts, even comments. I can like simply in one round trip, I can get like all of the information. Like examples, including like the filters, right? In there, even like sorting based on -H, this is descending. It's just interesting just to see. Link is in here as well, if you want to further explore. I'm not gonna deep dive into the query language of OData or GraphQL. Those are topics for like a specific niche for developers. I think like my intent here is to bring awareness so you know what's possible.
So before you move on, good question. So the idea is that using GraphQL is that it's gonna ease the load on the system. So like instead of asking the system, sending a query for each and every single question, you group them together. Is that right?
Not like easing the load, it's just minimizing round trips. I mentioned about like denial of service because we have like deep nested dependencies on your payload, on your query. I don't know how the relationships were defined, but you could like in a simple query completely bring it down, like your whole server, right? So it's just like you're minimizing round trips and retrieving more data in one single query. The main purpose. Right? In general, you see that like mobile implementations nowadays are leveraging QL with Apollo clients, React. I use React a lot. So it's really good that's in there, right? So it's just baked in. With mutations, right? So that's how you update, delete, create new records with GraphQL. It's like this standard where depending on what you're dealing with, what the table, have like the verb in the name of the table itself. So it creates user, we provide the payload. Update a user, so you provide like that sort of payload. Or you're deleting, right? So there's like, you can change that. There are ways of changing the schema, but by default, that's what you have with it. I think, right? Authentication authorization. So you can configure whether this is public or it's going to be required some sort of level permissions, right? Public, no authentication enforced, or protected, then you're requiring the access token. Right, so what happens there, like with authentication, it's baked in, let's say like easy auth on static web apps. It's simply like connecting, and that's creating a token for you to be consumed, right? It claims that then you can authorize the access to the particular action we have like on those configuration files, but you can go at that granular level of the claim. And yeah, this role, like in particular that we're verifying, dictates the level of access. You know that's in there, so take use of that. One of the examples I mentioned is that like the role, right? So for this table entities author, those are the permissions. Actions start. That's the role for admins. So admins can do everything. They can create, read, update, and delete. While anonymous users can only read the table. For all requests, this header is required. x-ms-api-role. You need to provide that. If you're not authenticated, matter if you try to hack, it's not going to work because you need to have like the cookie available when you are logged in. So only that doesn't work. You need to be authenticated. Yeah, the current user must be authenticated. The user must be a member of the role, right? Or if not, going to have like restricted permissions. And yeah, you can take like a REST or GraphQL, like the request needs to contain this header. That's the URL, right? So for reference, item level security. That's wow. It just feels like, wow, you're just going like to that level of the record. Here on the top, as before, in terms of actions, we can do everything, create, read, update, delete for admins. While on anonymous users, let's say, they can only read. However, they can only see, well, for this particular entity author, the item column, that's the column name, right? Item dot column could be visibility, or just the column name equals to something, right? What you define, that's going to compare the string, right, or the value itself in the database. You can just have like a single table that contains the level of permissions in different rows. The query is going to be based on that. It's called like policy. So you can implement that if you really want to fine grain that. Yeah, item column represents the table / collection. Collection is because the NoSQL. On tables, you have columns. Installation, really simple. You need to just to run like that. It's based on .NET 6, so you or update. You need to have .NET 6 core, right? Which is you can install it. And to verify if that's working, you just type like dev -- version. You can see what the version you're running against. That's the link with the reference for more details. All right, I'm gonna go with like, so we start with the app, right? The ABCLI. We're gonna initialize the connectivity, the connection. That's going to generate this DAB-config JSON that contains like the configuration settings. And then what happens, you're gonna add entities. Okay, this entity has this particular row with this level of access. So you're just including, adding or updating or deleting this DAB config. And then you simply start it, right? That's going to run the engine and you're gonna get like a URL for that. Links for a reference. Commands. I put like just a big dump in here just to show that you create like environment variable, contains your connection string. Then you can initialize the DAB. This one I'm taking MS SQL Server. And from there, I can add entities. This one is just called like book. And for a table called books, right? Permissions for anonymous, column star, asterisk. It's like anyone coming here can just do whatever. So I'm not like restricting. And then you just dab started. Let me show this one running because this is a zoom in this a little bit. Have my sheets in here, just so I can copy. Start like something, right? Because then we see how it works. Environment variable, I have already done it prior to this, so you're not going to see my connection string. But this is already initialized, so I'm just taking like my PowerShell just to that. The important thing is that you need to specify this host mode as development. Don't do that by default, it creates as production. And when you try launching the GraphQL portal, simply doesn't work. It's not a friendly message that you get. It's simply entity is missing. It's just like, oh, what's wrong? Public preview, right? This one is going to be updated, but make sure that's this one. You need to run host mode. At this stage, right, if I come in here, so the DAB config is there. All right, so please bring this so you can see. I want just to bring this. So a simple demo. I see that. That created do this. So that was created. And what I'm gonna do, that's not gonna help because I'm using the copy. That's my my source just for this demo. Copy that. And bring this. Come on. Right. At the bottom here, but what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna add a new entity. That gets refreshed, yes. And one created my entity here. We had more. I have more examples. I think like for the sake the demo, let me just continue on that. And well, like the block. And come back here. I'm going to include little mic. All right. Anyways, I'm gonna just moving over, but what I can do now, let's start. Right? Config not provided. Host. Let me open this. Empty closed. Let me come to this one because I have the variable environment, so I don't want to show my connection string here at all. Let me just copy here. Let me initialize that. Without it, once I start it, it's not gonna work. Let me just copy it. Just hang with me. Cd demo, ls cd simple. All right, let me less. So the variable is back here. So now what I'm gonna do is start. This one is launching. You're gonna see like we have like some port numbers in here. Localhost 5000. Let me bring my browser. Okay, so I have like my SQL connected. I'm connected to SQL, right? This one is going to display the authors. I don't have data really, but to show that I have some data in here. But when I come to localhost 5000, this should do it. It's healthy. Okay, I can start doing like my queries. Dash API, I have a block in here. All right, I think this one, the block, what's the one? So let's bring one. Just try book first.
It's not book, is it?
Books? No, it shouldn't be. I don't know if it didn't be book. People are just seeing. Just see here. I'll come back to this. In the meantime, I pull a GraphQL. Right. have like this visual representation of like the editor. I think it's one of what's called banana, I forgot the name. But yeah, it's just like available in development mode. If you don't do that host mode development, you don't get that. You're gonna get like a weird error. What I can do in here is just query that. It's not showing. I think it's because of that. It's not showing the books bringing authors. Yeah, I did include all my entities, so that's why it's not surfacing. You can see here that if I try author, it should work. Localhost -API -author. Yeah, that's it. So my bad, because like I didn't include a book, but the author is there. And I can do crazy stuff in here and doing like queries. I can just, I didn't nest anything, but I could have like a big payload. So that's how you get going, right? So you can just, as a developer, have this experience and quick create your queries, because then what you're gonna do, you're gonna grab those queries and bring like to your implementation, okay? Conscious of the time, let's just continue.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I might have tuned out if you've said it, sorry.
Yeah.
Can you put paging into that?
Yeah, you can. There is like support for cursors. So you can just put like first number of items, and after this, you get like another reference. You can.
It's not like if you just pull it out of the box and then run that thing, you'll get everything.
In this case, yes, you will. So you want like to filter, maybe like sort your query to be more specific. At this stage in here, I think it's going to, there should be some threshold. I have explored this to the number of items, millions of records. No, I'm assuming there should be, but good question. I think we can just find out. But yeah, at least I see this like not like as a visual representation of the data that you want to expose, but just to know that your query is working, right? So that's the editor. That's the purpose of it. Let me come back to we can run it on Azure, right? We can run static web apps or containers. Oh, containers make sense, right? Because then you can just like hook something on top of it. It's all baked in on static web apps. So you can just hook the database connection and things are going to just work together with your clients in front-end implementation. Have some articles in there. So if you keen to understanding Kubernetes, how you can do it. Well, that's, I have the references in here. The things with static web apps, you're simply getting this for free. Well, when I say for free, because you connect those service connections, and then you can simply not have the data API builder or an API itself. You're not paying for that. And so you can simply hook, and like web apps going to create that in place for you. If you want to make use of authentication, authorization, then you need to go to standard. But on the free version, you just get this one available for you. Other options, right? So if you're dealing with APIs, you can have Azure Functions. Pay for that. Or if you're taking this .api as a container itself, imagine the Azure function as a block, as API. That could be your container, right? You get this one static web apps for free. Very similar. That's already available on SWA, right? The static web app CLI. The main difference is just how the connections, the string is created, right? Because as I did here on the CLI, you can see the same folder, it gets populated. But if I do with SWA, then it automatically creates under this SWA-DB-connections. Right? I think like, I know that we are running out of time, but I would like just to show close that because the port number running, I don't want to have conflicts. I have like a Cosmos in this one, but it's the same sort of process, right? So deb start. This one was like for Kubernetes. The one I wanted to show, I don't think like we're gonna be to do it like with the authorization. I can quickly go to this. That's like the repository. I created this beforehand just to show how it works, but let's see here that I have like production, static web apps, books. I can come to my static web apps. I can hook that to my GitHub. I can just, let me create apps. Great. Okay, which one? My demo, simple, DAB, JS, free, Australia. Oh, we don't have. So East. See this one organization. That's me taking to the repository. I'm gonna see this deb SCWA simple, which is on the main branch. Presets, this is going to be HTML. And that's it. Gonna skip like the tags. Don't skip the tags, but I do it. And what's going to happen is that the static web app is going to be created. It's going to be launching the configuration that's already in there. And then things are going to be hooked up in my application, which is something very simple. Back to the here. What I have just a simple query, API REST. And then there is an iteration here where I load the books, I launch that. And you look, here it's saying REST because it matches a variable in here. Right? When I do via DAB, this one is called API. When I do it from SWA, this one gets populated as REST. It's a path, but if we're copying one, or copy from DAB to a static web app, then like, well, it's not working because of that. Just be aware of it. Go to resource, then I'm thinking here, let's see the database connection, right, which is in preview. Now, on my DAB configuration, I had the configuration only for the environment variable. I didn't specify it. So for this one, should load the database. Is a SQL. Then I have the resource group. Okay, just copy. Name, that's the one. Database is going to be my book demo. Username Azure user. And my server. Password. Going to be the last part of the demo. It works, we're done. But there are lots that can be done in there. Wish we had more time. I know that we're 5 minutes past, but this one should take like a few seconds. Good. And when I open that, okay, should have the book. Oh, now it is. Oh, that's in there. You can take like this on my, if you want to see, go like to this blog, it's called like Tech Play Go Kids. I put like a lot of stuff in there. You're gonna see example Kubernetes, static web apps, how you can convert it. There are good stuff in there. And tomorrow, I'm talking about Azure template specs. that's going to be online. I invite you guys to check it out, how you reuse inference codes, right? And that's going to be an interesting one but it's a different topic. I think that's it. Hope I could bring some awareness to you guys and start exploring, right?
Thank you, Marcel. Thank you guys for coming in. Yeah, before we finish, we want to take a group photo. If you don't want, it's up to you. It's okay. But if you want to take the group photo, we'll just take it in a second. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone.
I'm getting someone to take us a photo, right?
Nice.
I just gotta.
Thanks for everyone for coming along and also putting up with the photo because we never get these things in person and we really want to have them more in person. And
I've got a local server at work that I'm going to play around on. Like, they were throwing it out.
So here, okay, let's see down.
Thank you, Marcel.
Is the photo happening?
Yeah, squeeze in, the more we squeeze in, the closer up we can. You can stay there. I want to get to that guy, to the edge of that guy. And we get you to, yeah. Perfect. And give me a second, if you take the photo from there like that. Second to get in the picture. Go, front and center. Yes.
I think it's got to do with the lighting. That's a bit dark. I'm just going to use the flash.
Should be there.
I don't think the flash is working. Okay, now it can. There you go. Flash.
yay.
Yay, that's
Azure. Thanks to the MVPs for organising and.
well, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
They were thrown out.
Thanks everyone for online.
It's all online.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Ryan Lyon.
Using
Ryan, Rory, Ryan. Rory runs one of the organisers.
I'm trying to remember.
Ryan's like the IT tech promoter across everyone, everyone knows Ryan's everything. Whatever I'm doing. Actually, I'll stop the recording.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah. I'll set you to keep my invite. I'll be like.
Pipeline working.